September 11th, 2001 was the day of the infamous 9/11 attacks. It is also the day that has affected not one, but two generations, baby boomers and Generation X. The attack consisted of 19 men that were part of the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, simultaneously hijacking four planes and crashing them into major landmarks in the United States. Three out of the four planes hit their intended target, with the first plane crashing into the Northern World Trade Center tower, and the second plane crashing into the Southern World Trade Center tower in New York City, just 17 minutes later. Another 34 minutes later, just under 230 miles away, a third plane hit and destroyed part of the Pentagon, which is the United States military headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. The last plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania instead of its intended target, which was believed to be the White House. The attack resulted in the loss of 3,000 lives, along with over 6,000 people injured, in which all were civilians. Before this date, such a deadly terrorist attack has never been seen before, and had affected millions of people, mostly baby boomers and Generation X. For this interview, I will be interviewing my father.
My name is Jisoo, and when the 9/11 took place, I was 28 years old, and at that time, I was actually living in New York City and working in Manhattan, about 20 minutes away north of the ground zero where 9/11 took place. When I was working in New York City at that time, I have personally experienced the sadness, anger, and the loss of everything that everybody took as granted the day after the 9/11, and the some of the aftermath and all some of the trauma that people that who we were very close to felt. And myself also actually lost number of friends and people that I knew who lost their lives during on at the World Trade Center during 9/11. Well, the 9/11 affected many number of people again, especially people who had their loved ones in the building, and who perished, who lost their lives, especially their families and the loved ones, as I mentioned before. But on the same token, it dramatically affected a lot of people who actually were inside the building, but who safely made it out of the building before the both buildings collapsed. The trauma that they actually had to endure left a very deep scar physically for them for years to come, and also mentally.
As said by their interviewee, the September 11 attacks affected not only the loved ones of those who perished in the attack, but also the survivors, and the trauma they have to endure, and how it will haunt them for the rest of their lives.
9/11 affected the baby boomers. Baby boomers are the ones who, when they were young, went through and experienced some of the international political turmoils, such as the Cold War and ending of the War, where they felt that the world is becoming a more peaceful place to live. But nonetheless, 9/11 actually showed them that that the world can be very unstable at a given time. And for the Generation X, they saw what happened in firsthand, and I believe, at least for Americans, it actually caused everybody who are Generation X to become more patriotic, and also really made people to be very cynical about the world peace and how the world can be very stable. And the factor of the religious difference between the different parts of the world, how actually that can cause the turmoil that can be felt by the entire world.
As the interviewee states, 9/11 affected up to two generations, the baby boomers and Generation X. The baby boomers were affected because during that time it was the end of the Cold War, and people believed that peace would follow. But the 9/11 attacks proved that world peace can become unstable at any time. For Generation X, they were the generation that was there to experience it firsthand, the devastation of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Members of Generation X also doubted if whether or not the world can ever be in peace because of the world of terror that ensued shortly after the 9/11 attacks. All in all, the 9/11 attacks mainly affected both the baby boomers and the members of Generation X. It affected baby boomers by showing them that the world will never truly be in a state of peace, because right after the Cold War, baby boomers thought that the world would be peaceful, only to have 9/11 happen, and the war on terror igniting shortly after. 9/11 has affected Generation X because Generation X was the generation that witnessed the attacks firsthand and were the ones to lose their family members and loved ones in the attacks. And for those who survived the 9/11 attacks, was and still is traumatized by the events that happened on September 11th, 2001. That is who September 11th, 2001 has affected.